Ladies and gentlemen, in today's report, we will analyze the groundbreaking speech delivered by U.S. President Donald Trump at the United Nations General Assembly, along with the surrounding developments involving Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. The key question is whether this marks a genuine shift in Washington's stance on the Ukraine-Russia war, or merely a tactical pivot by Mr. Trump. Immediately after their private meeting on the 23rd of last month, President Zelensky stated that he had briefed Donald Trump on the latest developments from the battlefield. According to Zelensky, the U.S. president agreed with Ukraine's position and expressed confidence that Kyiv could fully reclaim its pre-war borders, provided sufficient support was secured from NATO and Europe. What makes this remarkable is that Trump's stance sharply contradicted his long-held view that Ukraine would have to relinquish certain territories in exchange for peace. Even more surprising, Trump went further, describing Russia as a mere paper tiger and declaring that NATO could shoot down Russian aircraft if its airspace were violated. These remarks sent shockwaves through international media, widely interpreted as a dramatic reversal or even a complete about-face in support of Ukraine. On the same day, Ukrainian media reported that Russia continued its air campaign with 3 missile strikes and 115 UAVs, 15 of which hit their targets. On the ground, as many as 170 clashes were recorded, with Russian forces intensifying their offensives around Pokrovsk and Novopavlivka. Notably, Ukraine admitted that Russian troops had advanced nearly 9 square kilometers in the eastern Zaporizhzhia sector in just a single day. This development poses a serious concern for Kyiv, as Russian forces maintain relentless pressure with large-scale drone and missile operations. An unexpected but unpredictable statement. Immediately after his meeting with Zelensky, President Trump published a lengthy post on social media. In it, he asserted that with patience and sufficient financial support from NATO and Europe, restoring Ukraine's original borders was entirely achievable. Observers have described this as Trump's strongest anti-Russian declaration since returning to the White House. Yet, it is worth noting that barely an hour later, the United States voted against an anti-Russian resolution proposed by Ukraine at the United Nations. This contradiction has led many analysts to conclude that Trump's words rarely align with his actions. He is well known for shifting his rhetoric depending on the context and his audience. In the preceding months, Trump repeatedly demonstrated an inconsistent stance. In July, he declared that he would provide Ukraine with Patriot air defense systems. Yet only a month later, during his meeting with Putin in Alaska, Trump shifted course, pressuring Zelensky to cede territory in exchange for peace. Notably, in August and September, Russia launched some of its most intense airstrikes to date, deploying nearly 1,000 drones and missiles in a single night. This has only deepened skepticism among observers as to whether Trump has truly shifted his position. Moreover, Trump slashed hundreds of millions of dollars in security aid to NATO allies along Russia's border, including Poland, Romania, and the Baltic states. He also imposed a ban on the export of advanced weapons systems to Europe. These moves have been seen as a heavy blow to NATO, directly contradicting his earlier pledge that the United States would continue providing weapons for NATO's use at will. Speech at the United Nations, a broadside attack. In his nearly hour-long address to the UN General Assembly, Trump did not limit his remarks to Ukraine. He openly criticized the United Nations, NATO, immigration policies, green energy initiatives, and even labeled climate change as the greatest hoax in the world. Trump argued that the UN does little more than write eloquent letters without taking real action to resolve conflicts. He went further, accusing the organization of creating new problems of its own, chief among them the uncontrolled migration crisis. Notably, he alluded to what he called the global deep state, naming figures such as George Soros, whom he accused of manipulating the United Nations and national governments to promote waves of illegal migration. Trump also mocked NATO members for continuing to purchase energy from Russia, describing it as an act of funding the very war being waged against themselves. Side details: Melania and Zelensky. Another striking detail was First Lady Melania Trump's refusal to hold a private meeting with Ukraine's First Lady Olena Zelenska. Despite repeated requests, Zelenska was only received during a group session for leaders' spouses. And even then, Melania left immediately after delivering a brief speech without greeting the other guests. Observers interpreted this as a cold signal from Washington toward Kyiv, despite President Trump's fiery rhetoric on the international stage. Taken together, the evidence suggests that Trump is sending mixed signals. On one hand, he speaks forcefully against Russia to appease domestic hawks. On the other, the actual moves by Washington, from slashing NATO aid and restricting weapons exports to Melania's pointed indifference, indicate that U.S. policy remains largely unchanged. Even pro-Ukrainian media outlets have conceded there are no signs of increased American support for Kyiv. Instead, Trump appears to be shifting the burden onto Europe and NATO. In this sense, Trump's remarks at the United Nations seem more like a political gambit than a genuine policy shift. He seeks to project toughness toward Moscow to deflect criticism at home, while keeping enough distance to avoid being drawn into a direct confrontation. The key question remains, does this represent a true reversal in U.S. policy or merely a tactical pivot crafted to serve Trump's domestic political agenda? Thank you for watching, and we look forward to bringing you further in-depth analysis in our upcoming reports.